Good day, dear viewers, and welcome to today's episode of Visite. I got a nice email from Petra, my namesake. And she writes, I've only been watching your programmes for some time. I've noticed them, and I'm realising that you always emphasise a lot on detoxification. Now, I'm still quite a layman at the moment, and I would be very grateful if you address the issue again from this perspective. And does the urgency and necessity actually affect every person today or only some? That's a topic, and I would very, very much like to bring it up again today, because in this series, it is, of course, very easy for those who now know about these things. You can switch it off. But for those who want to hear about it again, I have to tell you, quite honestly, we live in a different time than 100 years ago. And we doctors try very hard to look at your metabolism. We measure your cholesterol. We also measure long-term sugar. We look at the blood work. And then there are a few more parameters. Sometimes vitamin D isn't included, but that's it. And that is no longer timely. I can't build my house in the basement and think in advance that I can start with the second and third floors. I cannot understand illness without knowing what happened. Any disease process is always a process and never a condition. And if I want to understand what life needs, and if I understand it as a doctor, what life requires on a day-to-day basis for all of these hundreds of thousands and millions of metabolic processes by itself to provide independently, if I even approximately understand, and I believe a human life and intellect will not be enough to understand approximately what our immune system does every day, how finely tuned these processes are, then I also know what the body can and must do when these processes are no longer available to it. Why don't we examine people on the content of bisphenol A? This is a plasticizer. I'm still the generation when Tupperware came along. We have plasticized our society. We're stuck with the garbage now. We're now on the verge of what is bearable. We have taken care that meanwhile, all this fine plastic finds its way back to us via the fish, via the seals, via the sea creatures. We ourselves are the ones who are now also experiencing the tit for tat, but we have been doing this for years. And until 2011, there was still this bisphenol A as a plasticizer in baby bottles. That took decades to take out. It is a great advantage that today we see that the phthalates, the plasticizers get out of toys. Children's toys in Germany are specially certified, but this is not the case with the simple and cheap Chinese toys. But this bisphenol A is an extreme xenohormone. Why do we have so much hormone-active increase? Hormone-active tumours, whether it is the prostate, whether it is breast carcinoma, whether they are colon carcinomas, why don't we check for bisphenol A? Why isn't it important to us doctors? Don't we know? If we don't know, then we can't look for it. And this wonderful program, or even the health format that this channel offers you, and you will notice that they will never bother to find anything alternative to something, but to understand. Because if you understand, you can only act consciously. And the question of the toxicity of bisphenol A, which of course is still contained in many drinking bottles leads to cell damage, leads to unparalleled health damage. And we should know that. And we should also raise awareness for it from a medical point of view. And we can only come up with the facts, and we can present you these investigation results so that you know what to do. But at the latest, when an extremely developing disease process has also developed for you, at the latest then. Toxins, that's a really big term, but let's just think that, for example, lead and aluminium, and above all, mercury, damage the function of our mitochondria. These are all neurotoxins too. You must know whether you carry such a burden or not. I can't tell it by looking at you, neither in your appearance, nor can I see inside you, but with a suboptimal detoxification, and that brings me back to your question, there must be a way to get to these questions. Because when you accumulate these toxins, and if you can't detoxify these toxins, the liver does it for you. It makes it pass through the kidneys so that you can eliminate it. Then these toxins remain in the connective tissue. The body stores it there. If they are not stored in the connective tissue, they remain in the kidneys, or also in the organs, or in the thyroid gland, in the liver itself. Or like aluminium, for example, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. These are all targets of attack of these toxins that cannot be felt. And it is especially with mercury that they go into the cell nucleus. They affect gene expression. It's not like I have this gene, my detoxification has to be bad. If I have this gene, I'll be a tumour patient tomorrow. No. The gene can be on or it can be off. But just healing that gene doesn't mean anything. This is what constitutes the toxicity of our lives, which of course then in the context of mitochondrial cell damage, then lead the energy power plants to an extreme energy deficit. And we called the word mitochondrial disorder, and there are thousands of illnesses I would name like that, but I wouldn't give them the name because also diabetes and gout and Parkinson's are all mitochondrial disorders. And what is a very strong mitochondrial disorder is a tumour, and that's why it's so important that we know medically when mitochondrial damage occurs. And a massive attack by many free radicals, that we as humans need high protective antioxidant therapy. There's a lot of mercury exposure too. You all know from the amalgam. The amalgam is a mercury alloy. It contains not only mercury but also silver, zinc and tin. And if these fillings, for example, I'm now a raw foodist, or I now have very spicy or very hot food, then of course these heavy metals are released from these fillings. But mercury is also in vaccines. Mercury is in the fish we eat, unless we take that from an aquaculture facility that certifies as organic. Otherwise, the mercury leads to extremes symptoms, from immunodeficiency to sleep disorders, migraines, headaches, dizziness, neurological disorders, MS, Parkinson's, and all those things. Please remember lead. We still had lead petrol engines up until 2000. This tetraethyl lead in gasoline was the anti-knock agency in the engines, but that was until 2000. The half-life of lead is 30 years, mercury 38 years. So please don't underestimate that. And the lead is still contained in dust, in sandboxes, in children's play day centres outside, that are in the middle of the city's contaminated sites. Lead accumulates also in vegetables through the rain, but also in beer. Canadian beer contains a lot of lead. But also in water, old pipes, and of course you don't have to ask the question here. A smoker, of course, risks it with increased intensity. Lead accumulates in the bones, and we don't have to talk about toxic bone damage or even osteoporosis. We might have to just think about cadmium and lead and at least clarify these things that create bone disease. And also bone instability. You know the bones are our sites where the blood is formed. We also have to examine these people for these stressors. If we have a blood disease, whether it's now anemia or leukemia or another disease. Lead makes us rigid. Lead creates depression, exhausts underachievement, difficulty concentrating. Lead and mercury are things that can also transfer blood pressure up. That's why I think it's so incredibly important that you know these things too, and clarifying these questions during a normal health check, whether you are living in a city or living in the country, being on a thoroughfare. Also living on the street, the many people who also are drivers or flight attendants, those are heavy loads. And to the heavy and light metals, we have often discussed the question of aluminium by the chemtrails, by the food additives, E173, 520 to 523, so artificial bleach or baking powder. These are all things that, of course, also massively damage our intestinal situation, and from the damage in the development of permeability of the intestinal mucosa. This is the so-called leaky gut syndrome. You transfer mercury, lead, aluminium, fungi, parasites, scatol, hydrogen sulfide, everything gets through. And you let it through because this barrier is opened by small inflammations which then, via cell scars, the so-called tight junctions, open this temporary intestinal mucosa and let it pass unhindered. Otherwise, our intestinal mucosa is actually our most important immune organ. That said, all of these things help the body becoming toxically loaded over the years, and I don't want to say that with any concern now. I just want to say getting sick and slowly provoking a symptomatology also means we have to take care of it at this present time. And sometimes I'm really tired when I simply hear from people that they have never heard or known about these things, or that they will actually get swept completely under the rug when these things are mentioned. When I recently had a conversation with a neurologist, only then did I hear that he was also very open to complementary medicine, but the more I went into the topic, the more he disagreed. There would be no evidence for that. And that would not have been proven. And I don't even know how many thousands of studies are already available, how many incredible books have been written by, for example, Dr. Joachim Mutter or Peter Genrich. Do not get poisoned, and in general about the toxicity of the metals. Patients are already more interested today, Of course, because it is also their disease. But your illness is my illness in the sense that I would like to find a way out of it together with you. And if we haven't found that path yet, then we don't have the solution yet. Life is change, life is growth, life is creation. And the more we put into your hands, the more you can do, and that's what matters. There isn't a good doctor or a bad doctor who doesn't solve your problem, but who shows you the way out of the problem. And these toxic exposures, and I'm talking about mercury and aluminium and lead. I also mean, of course, organophosphates. I mean herbicides, pesticides, glyphosate. And our entire life, our environment, our polluted air. These are all things we have to react to. We have to be aware of this. Also from a medical point of view. That we cannot only treat all of this symptomatically, but that we can help people in their need to grasp complexity, and if it goes against a professional code, to take care of things, because I might be interfering in an internal medicine field, or as an ENT doctor in an orthopedic, because it affects the cervical spine, then I simply have to say that a general practitioner should be trained again very quickly with a much stronger orientation to see the human being in this totality and integrate the information that they specifically receive into an overall picture of this person, because the family doctor knows you and they know about all your life situation, about your daily worries, because these are all things that are incredibly important. I'm still shocked when I treat patients or they come to us and tell me that they live very, very consciously and only really eat from their own garden and are very fixated on organic, and then I look in the mouth. And the mouth is full of amalgam. That's not possible. And the amalgam is so highly toxic that all the quality food I eat now completely loses its significance for me again and again. So amalgam, and dentists sometimes say that the extraction of the amalgam is more harmful than these fillings. They are completely washed out. They've been in there for 30 years. A way has to be found. It has to get out, and the body must be relieved. Because the detoxification of the body only begins afterwards. I can't bind, I can't chelate until the fillings are gone and the amalgam is out. That means I now need someone who works with a rubber dam, who secures me highly, who protects me. I need someone who has a good clean-up sucker. I need someone now to carefully drill this out. There are certain techniques which, with a really very slow drill, with a fresh air supply through the nose, which also has an air purifier requirements. And of course, these are all things where I just have to say, if you take this step, you should really take 6-7 capsules of zeolite or the powder beforehand. Because zeolite as a rock mineral now binds toxins immediately and drains you and detoxifies you. People also take a high dose of chlorella algae on these days. High doses of vitamin C accelerate detoxification via sodium selenite. 200 micrograms, maybe in these days 300. Drink a lot, take an alkaline bath in the evening, scrub the skin crimson, put about 3 tablespoons of alkaline bath. In a full bath, stay in there for 90 minutes. The pH of the blood is 7.3, 7.4. The alkaline bath has 8.5. So it all goes in one direction from the inside out. We've had great success with these bamboo pads to the feet via the kidney point. We say that the feet are the third kidney. Foot baths are also very important. Make yourself an enema in the evening so that what comes through the liver, also through the intestines, is really discharged. And of course, take care of this amalgam removal very responsibly. After that, the way is clear to rid the body of these toxic metals. And you will see that these are sometimes very laborious, sometimes very tedious processes, but some which the body also, I want to say, had to accept, with which it had to cope, somewhere for weeks, months, years, and sometimes decades, that stand X today. For some, it has already changed a lot in terms of health. For others, a process begins, and the other does it preemptively. But do it and assess the urgency too. And learn to reorient yourself in your environment. What do I eat, and what do I buy, and what do I put on my hair, and what do I need? That should probably be a big, big rethink. And that's why, coming back to your question, it's so important to me that we analyse it medically for you, that we can find a way out of it with you, and that we all, each in our position, show a responsibility to protect life. And the only one who will benefit from it is always you, and that makes a doctor happy. A doctor is not happy if they cannot solve the problem. And although we destroy our livelihood every day, someone once said, but that's fulfillment, and that's beautiful, to protect people from something. Because if we don't know anything, but we do know what Parkinson's needs, what MS needs, what autoimmune diseases need, they aren't strokes of fate, but they need commitment on both sides. And if you want a quick solution, we have to learn to live with a situation. And I can look back on 30 years and all these endless people that I have also been able to accompany. And I have seen many, many things, difficult, big. And I don't want to say that these are easy paths, but for me, there is no other way out than to first understand what happened to me, whether consciously or unconsciously, and what else can I do today so that I can give my body the chance to be healthy again tomorrow. With this in mind, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really looking forward to next week's episode of Visite. Goodbye.